All right, welcome everybody to episode number 54 of Collectible Live. Today is Sunday, November the 27th, 2022, and my name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank everyone who tuned in last time with our guest, Brett Charville of Standard Gaming. You can check out that episode on the Collectible app YouTube channel, as well as the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel. But let's bring out this week's guest. He's a former employee of the Baltimore Orioles and the Atlanta Braves. He's an industry consultant and a content creator, Danny Black. Welcome to Collectible Live. And how are you today, my friend?
I am absolutely fantastic. Thrilled to be here. Long time, first time.
Sounds good, buddy. Long time listener, first time caller. Well, welcome to everybody in the chat. If you're watching or listening, feel free to put your comments in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. But Danny, I want to start this one off with your passion for the hobby. You have it. Where does it come from?
I mean, I think I was born talking batting averages before I left the hospital. I had one of those fathers who ended up being a CPA. He was a numbers guy. So we were always talking baseball numbers. I mean, he would bet me on Tris Speaker's lifetime batting average and diehard Baltimore fan. So we were always talking baseball, Oriole and Baltimore Colts history. So it was really cool just growing up in that environment. And I just inherited that my entire life. It's really the only thing that I've consistently stayed with other than my family that I love to death. So I've been very blessed. I was a dealer in the 90s and, the hobby's been a part of my life. I was lucky to work for major league teams and absolutely every day of my life, I'm blessed.
Right on. Very cool. What kind of work did you do with the Braves and the Orioles?
So with the Braves, I was actually there the season they opened Turner Field after the Olympics. And that was, for those of you that know, that's the old stadium. And I actually worked as a liaison with Coca-Cola with the big Coke bottle that used to be in left field, that giant Coke bottle. So I worked for the Braves in the marketing side. And for the Orioles, I actually ran a art and memorabilia store for them at the stadium. It was the world's largest sports art gallery.
Very cool. So that ties right into ties right into the hobby, I would have to think. And you talk about art and memorabilia. We're going to talk shortly about the Art Basel initiative that Collectible is doing with eBay, which is pretty cool. Their display that'll be there. So we'll get to that shortly. But let's also talk a bit about what you do, your role in the hobby. You do, today, you obviously, well, I won't say obviously for the audience, but to me, you create content. You have a few different content initiatives out there that you're working on, but you're also an industry consultant. Can you just sort of explain for everybody kind of what you do, what sort of clients you have? What do you bring to your clients?
First of all, when I started as a dealer in the early 90s, it was a different type of environment. And so I lived through junk wax. I lived through the collapse. I worked in private industry for many years before coming back a while ago. And so I've been able to help clients and companies in this environment, shall we call it, between the pandemic and moving forward. And so guiding them and helping them be familiar with the hobby, being familiar with kind of the nuances, the thought of I call it the people on the ground, the collectors, and being familiar with all aspects of the hobby. I think sometimes it's hard for companies when they're raising money or getting started, or they get lost, in their world all the time, to have that real 360 view and how to connect with people, quite frankly, from a business standpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So when I think of a hobby consultant, an industry consultant, I think of a couple of prongs. First one is, servicing clients who are, like you said, corporate type of clients, companies looking to come in with a new product or service and helping them navigate the space, maybe helping them understand the personality of the hobby. You, as an experienced collector and hobbyist, can share with them the way the hobby may react and respond to certain initiatives, products, services, marketing strategies and campaigns. Let them, this may work, this didn't work before, tweak it this way. I'm sure, I have a feeling that's part of what you do. But what about consulting collectors? Do you have any like collector / investors who call on you to say, hey, Danny, should I pick up this 51 Bowman Willie Mays PSA 6 or should I buy a 52 Topps, Willie Mays, and a PSA 4 sort of thing. Like, do you provide that sort of advice to people as well?
Well, your level of research is unbelievable. Yes. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I helped a client buy a 51 Bowman Willie Mays, and so that you really caught me off guard with that level of preparation. Really unbelievable. I've never been interviewed with that detailed, and that was a private sale.
That was a coincidence. Let's just put that out there.
and so my client knows that was a coincidence. So yeah, no, absolutely. I love working with private clients. It's some of my best conversations about the hobby. You get to focus in maybe on a couple cards, and you're talking about passing down a lot of times to the family. And they think about their children and grandchildren. And a lot of times for them, it's an alternative asset for them. It's instead of having classical investments, this is another way for them to have their money at work for them and have something that they really get to enjoy interacting with. So whether it was a 48, 49 Leaf Jackie for a client, a couple months ago, or the Willie Mays, whatever it may be, that part of it is a blast.
Yeah, that would definitely be a lot of fun. Helping people spend/invest their money into cardboard. What's better? The only thing better than that is doing it for yourself. So doing it for other people can be quite gratifying as well. Let's say hello. We have a few people in the chat. We have Jeremy Allen from Collectors League. Jeremy, what's going on? I believe Jeremy acts as a bit of a industry consultant as well. So great to have you on board, Jeremy. We have my buddy Darcy Ravlick from British Columbia. What's going on? Darcy says hello to you as well, Danny. And Jake Dahl, loyal viewer and listener, is with us again. Jake, welcome to the show. Let's talk a little bit, Danny, about content. We both do content, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to let the audience know kind of what you're working on. And we do have a bit of a common thread for content, being that I'm a former host of Hobby Hotline, which is on the Hobby Hotline YouTube channel every Saturday morning at, I believe, 11 a.m. Eastern. Hobby Hotline is also Tuesday nights on the Bench Clear Media YouTube channel. You've become a host of that program since subsequent to myself leaving, but you do Hobby Hotline. What other content pieces are you a part of?
Hobby Hotline is a blast, and for those of you who don't know, people like Jeremy and I, content creators, we just get together, and I know you've got a great show also, and we just enjoy the camaraderie and talking about the hobby. So I have that. But then John Newman and I are also starting a new show called Card Menches, and that's going to scratch a little bit of a different creative itch where we're going to kind of talk the hobby, but also talk the sports world in general. I mean, we all know that today's football games might have an impact on card prices this week, and let's have some of those fun conversations, and we're not afraid to talk about an over under every so often, and so we're going to stretch our minds to include more than just cardboard. There will be plenty of hobby talk. And then, of course, my own podcast, Sports Bald, which I'm very proud of. And I get guests that interest me and basically get to do whatever I want because, sometimes it's just fun to have fun.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Good evening to you, Perk. Great to see you. And thanks again, Jake. So let's chat a little bit about the role of content in the hobby. And obviously you and I are I guess worthwhile we talk about it. We both create content. We both create various different programming within the hobby space. But I want to just touch on collectible strategy because, I've been working with Collectible now on Collectible Live. We're coming up on a year and a half here doing this show. But ever since I first met Ezra, who's the CEO of Collectible, I had him on Sports Cards Live, my flagship show. I had him on that. It's about 2 years ago right now. 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 2 years ago. And he first came on and we talked about Collectible and what it was, fractional ownership. But one thing that really stuck out with me when I first talked to Ezra, which really endeared me to him and the company, was that he really expressed that their strategy was to be a bit of a content hub and to share knowledge and to grow the hobby, not keep the knowledge to themselves, but to share it with a hobby, even with competitors, and get the word out there, grow the space. And I always thought that was a real noble, initiative that they undertook. And the funny thing is that about 6 months later, they reached out to me and we created this show in collaboration. So they really put their money where their mouth is, if you will, in that he said that and then they went and they did it. And I love when somebody, you know, not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. And I feel that Collectible does that. So for you, the role of content in this space, just speak to that for a few seconds.
Yeah, great. And Ezra is a great example because I liked the Collectible platform before I met Ezra, and so I decided to just reach out and have him on my podcast. Well, as a content creator, I don't necessarily go into an interview with all the answers. I don't want to know everything. I want to have an honest conversation, and just talking to him and asking questions and learning about it. I felt that I put out one of my best episodes because we were able to talk well beyond just the borders of a typical, conversation about a company. And so one of the roles of content creators, I think, is we all come from different angles. So when we interview, similar people, or we interview people on the same topic, I mean, all of us did a segment on the Aaron Judge home run ball. What I really enjoy is having smart conversation to lead that into another conversation. I want people to think. I want people to have the passion that I do, and that's what Ezra showed. Ezra showed that he had that passion in that interview I did with him, and as a content creator, to be able to show that to people who listen and watch, that to me is the best thing I can do, is to pass that along and to let them see another side of some of these people that they may only see small glimpses of. And I get to enjoy showing that off because we really have great people in the hobby.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there's all sorts of different types of content. I could, the hobby content is a genre in and of itself. Within hobby content, we have different genres. I would put out there as well. And it's nice to be able to kind of select what you want to watch, what you want to consume, listen to, find the creators that speak to you. And I think most people are doing that now. We're kind of like, we're 3 years into this the eruption of hobby content. I think people who take it seriously, the consumers of it, have started to really curate their menu of what they listen to and watch. So very good. And hopefully, besides bringing the news, which a lot of content creators do, hopefully there's enough creators that are also bringing education, experience, passion, inspiration to the hobby. That's something that I think you and I both strive to deliver. Let's move it along. Let's touch upon startups. One of the things that I wanted you to bring to the audience today was, when you are advising your clients and you are talking about breaking into the hobby with a new product or service, what sort of advice do you have? Some key bullets that you bring to every client in your initial discovery meeting that kind of say, here's what you need to understand, here are some of the nuances of the hobby? Like, what advice do you give a startup when they first approach you in these initial discussions?
100% accurate. First of all, I want to get to know the people because if you don't have a good relationship with the people you work with, nothing else really matters. So I want to see that they have that passion and that they're invested into their company to better the hobby, to add something new to the hobby. And I want to work with companies that are going to be an added benefit to business-wise, consumer-wise. And then the list of questions are, how do we fit that bill? Are we a disruptor? Are we looking to get bought out? Are we looking to self-generate our funds? And, we get into a lot of the business side of it. What are your goals? What are your 5-year goals? Are you giving up shares yet? Are you looking to go public? And one of the things that, that I worry about is if I have too many companies say, I'm looking just to get bought out by fanatics. Well, sure. So am I. My son would like to be also. Yes, we all would. That's not a business plan. So, one of the things I want to look for is where are we on the business plan? And a good working relationship will be somebody who is realistic about a timetable for development, competition in the marketplace, and understanding where the industry is right now, because it does shift quickly. And, as Ferris Bueller said, life comes at you fast.
So based on some of the experiences you've had with these, I'll call them corporate clients. The word corporate, it almost connotes big, but it doesn't have to be. It could be it could just be an entrepreneur who incorporated a corporation, another corporate, and they've got $100 to go to start with. It could be very small. With some of these corporate clients that you have met along the way and that you have done consulting with, based on those experiences, how important is it from your perspective for someone breaking into the hobby with a new company, product, or service? How important is it for them to have had prior startup experience, business experience, entrepreneurial experience?
It's a great question. I think there's two prongs in this industry, and I think you need to have the startup experience without a doubt, or somebody on your team to lead that. And Jeremy, you couldn't be more correct about that. The second part is you have to have a passion and a knowledge for the business and the industry you're going into. So to find somebody who has a startup background but also has hobby experience is challenging. So the best companies are, and there's major companies that have brought in new leadership recently that have some people with a technical background and some people with more of a hobby background. And those are the two pieces, I think, the two prongs that have to go together. One without the other makes it hard to be successful, without a doubt.
And have you, in your experiences, so actual experiences, without naming any companies, of course, have you ever met with a company that's looking to start up in the space and you just thought to yourself, you know what, this isn't going to work? So, all the best, but I'm not your guy. Has that happened to you? I'll just start with that one.
Well, I don't think you can ever have a bad relationship. So I like taking phone calls with people and talking to people. Yeah, I've been approached by companies, and after the first meeting, it's clear it's not a good fit professionally. A lot of these are good companies, good people, but for me, an added benefit and what I can do for the company or my outlook on the company moving forward is not something that I want to necessarily sign up to be a part of. Now, some companies I will chase down. I chase down center stage. I will say that out loud. I love their product, and I reached out to them. Most other companies I work with, they've approached me, and then it's more of a, do I know their product? Can I get familiar with their product? And what can I do to help?
How much do you get into the vision? Like you talked about the business plan, and really you were alluding to the exit strategy when you talked about, kind of tongue in cheek, where their whole plan was to get bought out by Fanatics. But, looking past that, how important is the vision, and how creative and visionary are some of these entrepreneurs that you're working with, to the point where their vision might be so grand that the hobby might not be ready for it yet? Does that happen? And when it does, what's your advice to somebody like that who might just, want to keep on going and doing what they're doing? Or do you ever have to say, you know what, park this for a year and let's revisit it?
Right now, I would say if I was to pull back the curtain, the companies that are fighting in the data space right now, that need pricing information and that need customer information and data and sales history on eBay that everybody tries to get. Those are the companies that you really want to make sure they have a plan, that's going to attack that exactly. Other companies have different approaches. So I really like somebody who can come in and, we have to be realistic. It's going to take a certain amount of time, and the hobby is going to move past you in that time, and you have to be ready for that. Or you might think you're better, but there are 5 other competitors. So you have to be realistic that even though you go to bed at night thinking your product's the best, you have to be realistic that there's competition and the marketplace may view it differently. And that's one of the hardest things with entrepreneurs is there's such an ownership and there's such a love for what they do. You can have blinders on, and you can need to have that heart-to-heart conversation.
And that's one of the things of value that you're going to bring to these meetings. When you say to the client that, the market, the hobby is going to view it differently, you actually have insight and experience to be able to tell them that. How often do you find entrepreneurs? And the reason I ask this is because I have a mentor. I actually work with them right now at Tag Grading, Steve Cass, our founder. And he likes to say to myself, to our team, he says, let's not fall in love with our story. what does that sentence mean to you? Do you ever approach your clients with that same sort of thought? Like, listen, you've got a great idea, a nice vision, but let's not fall in love with our story. Is that something that you've ever used, or what does that mean to you, really?
Well, I think you have to be ready to pivot and not be afraid to make the company better, even if it doesn't align with your original vision. And the example I always give is Jeff Bezos started out to make a bookstore, an online bookstore. Well, had he stuck and said, "That's my vision, I won't do anything else," there would be no Amazon today. So I think, you have to be willing to take your vision and say, "I can make it better, I can make it bigger, I can make it more successful." And it's having that humbleness, even if you still have the drive to separate those things. And that can be really hard. And it can be hard emotionally. I know with my own company, I'm emotionally invested in every client or everything I do. And as an entrepreneur that works to build a company, separating that, it can be hard, but they should love with their company.
Okay, last question on advice for startups in the hobby is going to be this one. Pretty open-ended question, so get ready for this, Danny. If someone were to come up to you, a hobbyist, a collector who is looking to retire or quit their career as whatever they've been doing up until now and go feet first into the hobby with a business, but they don't even know what sort of business they want to start, where do you see the most opportunity for the next 1 to 10 years sort of thing within the hobby for somebody who might be, and I'm catching you off guard here, so I don't know if you're going to have an answer, but what area would you direct somebody to say, here's somewhere I think there might be some space, might be some potential success. Of course you have to have the vision, you have to have the work ethic and all, and the finances to assume that's all there. What area, what sort of product or service would you direct somebody to take a chance with?
I think almost since the beginning of modern collecting, when the first Beckett price guide came out, people have been looking for good, accurate, up-to-date pricing. And I think whoever perfects that, and I don't even know if that's possible to perfect, if anybody can ever figure that out, I think that's been the golden goose for a long time. And there are a lot of companies in the space. I mean, dozens trying to find their version of that. And some of them do a tremendous job. But there are so many cards, and there are so many cards since the beginning of time. And there's so many rare cards, and there's so many cards without comps. It's a real challenge. So if somebody can ever figure out that magic algorithm, which can't really be quantified, that would be the way to go if you have the funds and the resources and the technology.
And there's so many platforms, and there's so many card shows, and so many, direct deals between hobbyists that you're never going to get that data anyway. So I agree, it's very difficult to be able to aggregate all that data. You have a couple of the major players in the space that I'm aware of would be Card Ladder and Market Movers by Sports Card Investor. Those are the two that I'm aware of and that I've checked out. But yeah, it's definitely something that's a big answer to the question, because that takes a lot of resources to do something like that. So, all right, good stuff. I appreciate us going down that rabbit hole of advice to startups in the space. Let's switch over now to your 30,000-foot view of the hobby, a bit of a state of the hobby sort of discussion, where things are at right now. Obviously, there's a lot of narrative out there. Narrative comes from a lot of the content creators, or even random Instagram and Twitter accounts, because nowadays everybody's got a platform. All you have to do is have an email address to have a platform. So what is your current 30,000-foot view of the hobby? Think about that, because before you get there, I just do want to I want to just say hello first to Collector's Dream. Welcome to the show. We got Love What You Collect. Also, welcome to the show. And you mentioned Center Stage a couple minutes ago. We've got John Wee, who's one of the founders of Center Stage, who says that collectors are resistant to change. Tell me about it, right? They're resistant. That is probably the basic constant in this hobby for any entrepreneur, to try and figure out how to overcome that. And I think one of the best ways is through education and content, which is what Collectible entered into the fractional space almost as the original, with a couple of other competitors that are doing it in other genres as well. But that's something that, they're constantly dealing with. Tag grading, automated grading, which I'm a part of. That's something we're dealing with. So John, who's in the Center Stage is a company that you are working with. It's funny, we both do some work with Center Stage. You do as well. And they're a supporter of my flagship show, Sports Cards Live. But they have a image recognition system that you scan. You take your phone, you scan the card, and it will show you some pricing from eBay. So another sort of price aggregator platform, So pretty interesting. Collector's Dream says Center Stage is great. And what I say, I shout them out at the beginning of every episode I do, and I say, please join me in supporting these hobbypreneurs. I love that word, these hobbypreneurs, as they strive to bring new innovation to the space, because I'm always going to support innovation. So anyway, sorry, sort of off on a tangent there, but with all these things said, back to your 30,000 foot view of the hobby, where are we at right now?
Well, I think a lot of people are making comments that the hobby's down, prices are down. I think the ceiling's crashing, and I typically take a slightly different view when I've been talking to clients or talking to companies right now. This is a time of year that traditionally is a slower time of year. So I think that because of the pandemic, there's a lot of people or a lot of normal cycles that got broken for a year or two. And it's hard to remember what it was like every year before that. And because we have a lot of sports in season right now, you don't see a lot of movement unless something specific, really, really moves the needle. So I think normally going into the holidays, going to the end of the year, before tax returns, with money to spend on gifts, this has always been a downtime of year. So I want to take that as an important piece that we should be looking into. And then you talked about Card Ladder before. I look at their indexes all the time. And if you go through the past year, I mean, there are definitely areas in this hobby that are doing well, vintage being one of them. So the 30,000 foot view to me is we have a very big technological race right now, and a lot of companies coming in, whether it's fintech companies or organization and database management companies. But most importantly, we have a lot of cards that are still being sold. Some of them at a discount right now, but a lot of them that are holding their value, specifically in some areas. I think it's a great opportunity to buy, but I think we're also leaving the junk parallel era. I've been calling it that for a couple of years. And when you start adding up pop reports, and you have out of $199, out of $250, out of $499, out of $999, and you add up all of those, well, now you're really just into a short print. So I think, the numbers have thrown people off during the pandemic. If you don't have that experience years before of what true population control can be. And vintage is true population control. So I think that's why it always falls back as the safety net.
So you're not so down on where things are at. You remain bullish on the hobby as a function of enjoying your life, enjoying your cards, and potentially even investing. What about the macroeconomic situation that the world is in right now? North America, interest rates, inflation. Do you believe that there's a correlation between the economy and the hobby?
Without a doubt. And I think there's two ways to look at it. One of them is, like you said today, what is the state of the economy? And I think a lot of people right now, quite frankly, are looking for cash that they don't have that they might have had a year ago. And a lot of people are card rich and cash poor. So I think that's forcing a lot of people to maybe sell at a lower price, because they need more money for gas or more money for, other expenses. So I think without a doubt, those two things have to be connected. And my firsthand experience is people telling me that, people trying to sell collections and telling me that they just simply, put too much money into it and it's all tied up and they need to pay bills.
You mentioned the indices. Card Ladder has indexes that they publish, and I'm probably automatically updated just by their data. And I've been thinking a lot about indexes or indices in the hobby lately. And really, are they the gauge that we need to rely on or should be relying on to tell us the state of the hobby, from the economic state of the hobby, the investment potential of the hobby, that sort of thing? The reason why I even raise this and ask it is because when you look at these graphs, which are all over Instagram story posts and Twitter, I'm sure, you see a lot of the same trends going on between different indices. Some are just a little bit behind or ahead of the other, depending on the sport and that sort of thing. But these indices are made up of very specific cards. Sometimes there's few cards, sometimes there's lots of cards, but it does not include all the cards. And I wonder for myself, do I want to make decisions based on these indices, which are only showing you historical information? They cannot show you the future. That's just impossible. And are they actually, history is important, of course, but are they indicative of what's going to happen in the future? I'd argue no. And number two, are they indicative of are they guiding every decision that we as hobbyists and collectors / investors, or any combination of that, should they be guiding our decisions when they're only, the high-end indice, it's only based on the highest end cards? A lot of the graphs and charts that we see are based on cards that are 5 figures and up. Lots of them are like that. Lots of that narrative that we see is that, where most of the hobby is dealing in that, $1 to $100 card level. Even Collectible is a business. It has part of its business model is access to a 52 Topps Mickey Mantle for $10. You can own a piece of it. That's where a lot of people are. So how integral are indices and indexes? Is it indices or indexes? I keep flopping back and forth, but how?
I think you're good either way.
Either way, how integral are these indices to the common hobbyist?
I think that they should be part of the soup, but they shouldn't be the only decision you make. And I think part of the reason is what we talked about before, is where we are in data as a hobby and as an industry. I think we're early on in that conversation. So the data is not perfect yet, and I equate it almost to analytics in sports. Your original analytics, were not perfect, but they started showing you a little bit more information than you had before, and then a little bit more information. And over time, that's built up to a lot of information. Well, I think when you look at some of these indices and indexes, you are 100% correct. The cards that are on there, I think we need some sort of barometer for what makes that. I mean, to be on the Dow Jones, there are certain parameters to be on there. And just like stocks that move on and off, there should be cards that move on and off if they don't meet those qualifications. However, as an industry and a hobby, we have no measuring stick typically. Now, one of the shortcomings of anything online is you are only capturing online sales. So I still think we're missing every sale at a card show, every sale at a local card shop. And that's where a lot of value, I don't know if that's being reflected honestly. So that's why I think that data in those sites are fantastic. Part of the soup, not the whole soup.
Yeah, no, well said. Part of the soup, not the whole soup. I think that's really key. Maybe consider it, but don't let it be your sole guiding principle or guiding data, towards any decision that you might make. Interested to hear what the chat has to say. We've got over 40 people in here right now, so curious to know what anyone might think about this particular line of discussion that Danny and I have gone through right now. We do have a comment from JG, says the whole card market graph looks like an upside down V. Still lots of room lower to hit pre-pandemic levels. So I'm going to challenge that comment because it's impossible to know that. It's impossible to the whole card market. That's just not true. And the reason why I say that to JG is because there are some players who maybe weren't even around pre-pandemic and they're coming out of the gate, they're doing well. So they're just like this. Not everything is went up and came down. It's a generality. It's an untruth. And so I challenge the comment. That said, I do recognize JG's comment. It's a generality, and it does reflect a percentage of the hobby, but it's not the whole card market. That's just not true, but it is a portion of it is like that. How significant? I don't know. There's billions of cards out there, so we don't know what that is. But the ones that trade, it's probably a significant enough portion that's what we're seeing. JG comes back and says, okay, 75%. Well, that's at least different than the whole card market. And again, that's unprovable. We cannot quantify this. This is a complete shot in the dark that JG makes, but it's based on JG's gut, which I think is relevant and valid as well. Sports MD Collector, good evening to you. Glad to have you. Curious if anyone else has any thoughts on that line of discussion that we had. While we're seeing if we get any more comments on that, Danny, let's let you talk about something fun for you. You were doing some consulting work for the Babe Ruth Sports Museum. What would you like to mention about that?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that up, because talk about passion. Being from Baltimore, the home of Babe Ruth, if people are familiar, he was born in Baltimore. He first played for the Baltimore Orioles of the minor leagues. And so getting to work with them and I'll be honest, getting to see the artifacts and seeing some of the pieces of the museum is really, really cool. They currently host, whether or not people know, the original 1914. It's the Babe Ruth minor league rookie card, of which it might be the most rare card I've ever fallen in love with. It is actually on the Collectible platform. It was one of their first items, but it's right at the Babe Ruth Museum. So I get to go. I mean, I was there last week and I got to visit and take pictures. But helping them, and they are a nonprofit, plan activities and bring in speakers. And you talk about how important is it to educate the next generation on the history. So I find that very cool. Yeah, and one of the other things that I definitely want to say is, if you like these types of things, I own shares of that 1914 Baltimore News Babe Ruth. I cannot afford, I think the market cap right now is $7 million. Sure, if I hit that $1 billion lottery, I would have made a good play at it. But short of that, I really enjoy getting to go and look at it and say, you know what? So I got a piece of that. So that's one of the cool things for me. And that being said, getting to just support a good cause like the Babe Ruth Museum is really special. And I will say, if you come to Baltimore, Jeremy, I will give you a private tour. It is phenomenal.
I'd love to take you up on that, Danny, for sure. Collector's Dream says the most expensive card, Ruth rookie, when it sells. Yeah, likely to be. Time will tell. I mean, I do think a PSA 10 Mickey Mantle would be the absolute beast of a sale. And I wonder what happens the next time the PSA 8 trimmed Honus Wagner sells, that I believe is in Ken Kendrick's collection at the moment. Be curious to see what that sells for. Are we going to see a 9-figure sale of a sports card when either of those come out? I'm talking 100 million or more. Those are the two that could get there. That's a big number. I think I've heard speculation that a PSA 10 Mantle, 52 tops Mickey Mantle, would sell for 50 million. I believe that. I could see that happening. 100 million's a lot of money. 50 million's a lot of money. Who are we kidding? But what do you think?
From what I've heard, this is not the only Ruth News American that has or will change hands in the next year or two. And I think that there's only, 3 in circulation that people are really confident about, maybe 4. And if another one comes out, I think you're going to see that push the Mantle record that was just set, if not blow it away.
Yeah. And the Mantle record was for, I believe, an SGC 9.5 that sold for $12.6 million. That's the one we're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah. Right on. LA Collection says the only other 9-figure rookie card is yours, Jeremy. Wouldn't that be crazy? Thanks, LA Collection. John Wee makes this comment. Says publishers and grading companies took a lot of money. By publishers, I think he means card manufacturers. Publishers and grading companies took a lot of money out of collectors' pockets by charging market prices and upcharges. Panini charged $2,000 for LaMelo Ball rookie year hobby Prism and $1,000 for Donruss. So just a comment on state of the hobby and I guess where some of the money is going, where there might be some leakage in the hobby, where money is leaving within transactions. You tilt your head. What's your thought?
Vintage over the last year and pre-war vintage are both up. So I think, we just have to be careful the difference between maybe prospecting and active players versus retired players. There's always a difference in the way the market reacts. And I just want to clarify that that's definitely something to be, when you buy cards and you invest in current players, far more volatile than retired players.
And as has been said many times, in content by myself, by you, I'm sure, really your hobbyist view of the financial state of the market right now, and I'm talking about the card values, it's really based on your entry point when you came in. If you came in at the peak of the boom, which was like the last 3 quarters of 2021, if you came in, at all in 2021, you may not be feeling so good because values have come down since then. But if you've been around in this hobby, you've been holding cards for 5+ years, you're still if you were to sell everything and realize the values, you'd still probably make a lot of money on your holdings, on the cards that you hold. Not as much as if you sold them during that peak, but of course, not everybody can actually time the peaks. But if you were to sell your cards now and you came in the middle of 2021, you're going to take a pretty large loss if you were buying all those cards that the values were pumped right up. The LeBrons, the Kobe's, the Jordan rookies, all those sorts of things, the Trouts, that type of stuff. So interesting there. Let's see what Perk has to say. He says, if there are more collectors post-pandemic now who are staying in the hobby, but the market continues to incrementally drop, do those meet to create a floor, or has that already happened? That's like such a good question. Because what I like, Danny, about Perk's question here is that he's not only looking at one aspect, one influence on the market. He's looking at two. He's looking at what's being bought and sold, but also is the foundation of the hobby bigger now than it was pre-pandemic? And this is something I think is really important, that we have attracted a lot of new people to the hobby, or the hobby has had a lot of newcomers come in, and they're not all going to stick around. Some of them are going to have a bad experience and leave, but some of them, a percentage, we can't quantify. We can guess, just like JG is taking a guess. Maybe 50%, maybe 25%, maybe 80% are going to stick around. And that should, I believe, help counterbalance that thought that maybe the indices do return back to pre-pandemic levels. Anything you'd like to add or kind of say to round that out?
Yeah, and it's something we talked about before. I think this is similar to the junk wax era, where you are going to have some people that got in too high and are not going to financially be able to make it a business. But let's separate collectors from business. Collectors, if you really want to collect, don't overpay as an investment. Know who you are and know what your goal is. Because if you've collected and you've bought stuff you like and you didn't overpay because you were investing, then you should have a collection that you love right now that should be something you can enjoy through the ups and downs of, like you said, of the individual card prices.
All comes down to horizon. I've got a 25-year horizon. That's my plan. I don't really worry about the ups and downs day to day, week to week, month to month, because I'm not going to sell my investment worthy pieces for 25 years. That's the plan. So yeah, if it depends on horizon, but there's a lot of people whose horizon is literally next week, literally what's going to happen in next Sunday's football games. That's what the decisions are being made upon. I'm not criticizing or judging it. Each to their own. Approach it how you will. The hobby has room for everybody except those committing fraud. And so do that if you'd like to. But if you want to be able to save your mental state and really ride it out, I think it's important. And I don't mean to project my approach on everybody, but it works psychologically and economically as well to have a longer horizon, and that would go for any blue chip investment. And then now I mentioned blue chips. It's it all depends. If you're buying established Hall of Famers or if you're buying up at, the hottest rookie, you have to decide how risk averse are you? How much much of a stomach do you have for all the volatility that comes with, the week to week football and basketball and so forth?
Well, I'm first of all bringing you on my next consultation with the client, because that's pretty much the speech I give exactly. And it's just 100% true. Know what you love, know what your goals are. Know what your horizon is, and you can get some really cool stuff. And I don't care whether or not you PC your favorite team, or you're investing in Hall of Fame vintage. Just know what you're doing and have fun with it. But the other point I wanted to bring up is, I think right now a lot of people are worried about losing money that they put into it. And from a macroeconomic standpoint, there's actually a theory that selling it at any value is better to reinvest that into new product. And so, since we are looking at the 30,000 foot view, I do want to bring that macroeconomic theory out there. So I think there should be more action in the market. I think if you are sitting on cards, don't be afraid to sell them. And if you want to buy cards, don't be afraid to buy them.
And what you just said is advice that every business that carries inventory follows. If you have stale inventory, liquidate it, get rid of it, sell it, recover as much money as you can. Take that money. You may have paid $10 and sold for $3. Take that $3 and do your best to build that back up to 10, because your stale inventory, chances are, won't make its way back to $10 to a $10 value on its own. So be an entrepreneur, be smart, figure out how to be creative, figure out how to take that liquidation value and reinvest it and turn it back into the amount that you are trying to save and not lose. That is such good advice. And that's one of the problems, that there's so many this is going to sound terrible, but there's so many bad business people that are card dealers, because they won't reduce the prices on their cards. And maybe it's their own collection, so they don't feel the need to move them. That's fine. But the hobby could use a course of just a business. Some people in the hobby should take a business course. I think they would enjoy and do a lot better in the long run, and probably move more cards into appreciative collections. Somebody might want your card you paid 10 for. They're willing to pay 3, which is the fair price. You're not going to sell it to them. And now you're kind of, not that you owe them anything, because you don't, but you're withholding, or you're not allowing them to find that, to add that card to their collection, which is going to make them very happy. Put $3 in your pocket that you can now reinvest and find a way to build it back up to 10. So by sitting there and not adjusting your prices, you're doing damage to your own bottom line, and I want to say you're doing some damage to the overall hobby as well. And I think that applies. I got to think that through, but I think that makes some sense. Thoughts?
I think not that any one person's affecting the hobby, but repeating that by the thousands is what affects the hobby. So I think you can say that safely. We're not blaming any one person for the entire hobby. But I think that's a great point. And what somebody has to look at is, what is better, on your example, that $3 or $0. It's not $3 or $10. $10 is now not in the equation. That's off the table. $10 was last year. So today our conversation is $3 or $0. And that's where I think the hobby is different than a lot of businesses, because there's an emotional attachment. But I like this prospect. He's going to come back healthy. I still feel, and you talk yourself into that $3 card will be a $10 card again. No, it's not. That guy can't hit. He's done. And, so you do need a little reality and like you said, a business sense. And dealers are just as guilty as any other collector. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. You do see some very skilled dealers at card shows and elsewhere who understand this concept, and they're the ones that are super busy at shows, constantly turning over their inventory. And when you do that, the added benefit of reducing your price to move something out, it's like, first of all, don't be scared to take a loss. That is the best move a lot of the time. But by doing that, you're turning over your inventory, and you're bringing in more money, allowing you to buy more collections, to have new inventory. So the next time you're at that same card show, you're not going to have the same attendees just kind of walk by and saying it's the same guy with the same stuff month after month, year after year. I hear that so much about some dealers. It's the same stuff, show after show. Have new inventory, get those people coming back, repeat business. It's going to snowball. It's by far the better strategy than holding out to get $10 on your $3 card or whatever, and however those numbers fall out. Let's go to a couple comments if you're good. JG says, card dealers this weekend at my local show were in La La Land with their pricing. Yeah, they need a head shake or something. LA Collection says, don't fall in love with your story. Also, don't fall in love with your stale inventory. From a dealer who has thousands of cards on eBay, I agree 100%. I'm with you, LA Collection. Hodges says, getting a grasp on what sunk cost is very important and helps take emotional aspect out of your decisions. 100 sunk, exactly. Sunk cost is something that should not be recoverable. Almost inherent in the definition of a sunk cost is like it's gone. You're not going to recover it. You can often recover a portion of your sunk cost with in cards and reinvest it. That's a pretty cool kind of benefit or just aspect of sports cards as inventory. Sometimes your perishable inventory, it's worth zero. Sports cards for the most part are not perishable. I guess maybe after 150 years they become perishable. But anything you'd like to add to that before we get on to our last topic?
Number one, the gum is perishable, so be careful. And number two, I think the sunk cost is, I use the example of top loaders. Just because top loaders sold for $100 a pack during the pandemic doesn't mean you can resell them now at that price. So and nobody argues with that. And if you use that example, apply it to the cards as well.
Yeah, makes good sense. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about was a new initiative, a partnership that Collectible has entered into with eBay. So I'm going to actually share my screen and just show this email briefly to everybody and to you, Danny. So this is the Culture is Collectible email. Collectible and eBay announce a partnership. So I'm just going to scroll through. You can see Collectible and eBay announce multi-pronged partnership starting with Art Basel. So what they're basically doing is there's this Scope Art Show in Miami, Florida. It's coming up here in a couple of days. Collectible and eBay will jointly display iconic items from assets on Collectible, slated for the eBay vault, key pieces, legendary rapper Snoop Dogg. I love Snoop Dogg, by the way. Auction inventory, sneakers, comics, video games, and more. So pretty interesting what Collectible is always creative and looking for ways to grow the pie. Here's the website for the Scope Art Show in Miami Beach, November 29th to December 4th. If you are in the area, be sure to check it out. I would love to go, but I'm just not going to be in the area. And then finally, Collectible has launched their eBay selling account. And as you can see, 21 followers. I'm going to actually save that seller right now myself. So encourage people to go ahead and do that. And you can see some of the fine assets that are on the page. Here we have some art by my friend Andy Friedman, one of the great sports hobby artists, and a lot of really cool pieces that have been in the news and that are on the platform are being offered for sale on the eBay platform right now. Another aspect of what they are doing, Collectible and eBay, is that they'll be curating the Mint Collective high-end auction together, which is a pretty cool initiative, I think. The Mint Collective will be, it's going to be the end of March, beginning of April of next year. And Collectible and eBay are going to co-curate an auction. And I don't know if there's going to be a live aspect to it or not at the Mint Collective, like with people holding up their placards and, making bids. And then there being like the online portion. I'm not sure. I'll certainly be at the Mint Collective. So look forward to seeing what that'll be like. But at Art Basel here coming up in Florida, there will be assets on display and available for purchase on eBay's on Collectible's eBay site. So be sure to check that out if you're in the area, and just excited to see what else comes out of that. Danny, you're sort of in that area. Any comments on the Art Basel eBay Collectible partnership?
Yeah, my whole family is from down in that area, and my brother and sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is an artist, so Art Basel is huge in their world and huge down in South Florida. So if you've never been to Art Basel, and Scope is a part of that, it's an unbelievable experience. And Collectible, actually, great idea. They're going to fit right in with some of their stuff. Also, I got to tell you, how cool is that auction going to be when Collectible and eBay get to team up to pick items? I just can't wait to see what that catalog is going to look like. I putting them together, you're going to see some really cool stuff.
It'll be pretty cool. And I wonder if they will have some of the shareholders of certain assets on the Collectible platform vote to put items at auction. That'll be interesting. There's at least that is an outlet for actually, selling these assets and liquidating your shares if that's something that you want to do. I assume that would go to vote, but we'll definitely see. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is that I don't know anything really about Art Basel except what I've learned through Collectible, but I believe it's about art. And I like that the Collectible is getting involved in that and bringing the sports collectibles to that platform, because there's so much talk and appreciation for sports cards in the last few years as being art, being this generation's art. A lot of people like you and me and others that our fellow hobbyists, we have no interest. I mean, except for the financial value, we have no interest in hanging an 8-figure painting in our house, or even maybe $200 paintings in our house. We like sports cards and memorabilia for that matter. And I think there's a big movement towards people appreciating the artistic value, just the artistry in a lot of these cards, especially the vintage. Like, to me, these vintage cards, the 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, the 53 Topps Willie Mays, one of my favorite cards of all time. Having a 53 Topps Willie Mays or a 52 Topps Mantle, painted, hanging on your wall, I'd much rather have that than, a Picasso or a Rembrandt, who I didn't know these guys, and I never watched them paint, as in I never watched them play. So I'd rather have a big sports card hanging on my wall. Thoughts on that, Danny?
Well, as you know, I love sports art in general. I used to manage a sports art gallery. So, I think America is tied to, sports art, whether it was Norman Rockwell or Leroy Neiman. I mean, over the years, we didn't think about them as sports artists, but some of the most iconic sports images have come from their brushes. So I think easily the Jackie, you got to go first. That wasn't fair. You took the real good one. So yeah, I mean, these are true pieces of art. Artists have replicated these cards before, so they have been turned into art. And I would love nothing more than to have my whole wall covered in sports art.
Yeah, I'm with you. On theme with Collectible, looking to just share knowledge, spread content, grow the pie. Collector's Dream says Art Basel is like the Super Bowl of art. People come from all over the world. Goes on to say, I live in South Florida, been to Art Basel. The reason why I say that is because this just tells me, like, Ezra and the Collectible team, they've got vision, right? They're by taking these sports cards and memorabilia, these valuable collectibles, we're calling them assets, and displaying them at Art Basel. I mean, and I didn't realize that Art Basel is the Super Bowl of art. It is now going to expose people from all over the world to these pieces, and that is a method. It's one channel towards growing the hobby. So kudos to them for having that vision and really putting out the effort and the resources to do so.
One of the things I think people forget is that fractional ownership goes back to horses and wine for hundreds of years. So the concept's not new. We can just have a lot more fun with the assets right now.
It's much more fun to own a fractional portion of a sports card or piece of memorabilia than it is to own a fractional ownership of a company where you don't even know who the managers are. You don't even know what they're doing day to day. You just buy the stock because you buy the stock, or it's part of an index fund you're invested in. So you have a bit more knowledge and control. But at the end of the day, you're right. Fractional, everything's fractionalized nowadays. I heard someone say a pizza. You take a slice of pizza, it's fractional. You're getting 1/8 of that pizza. No, get your own. I want the whole pizza to myself. I want to hold it. I want to hold the whole pizza in my hand, but vacation ownership, the stock market is a fraction. It's all fractional. So speaking of that, let's end with this question for you. And I think you've mentioned it, but I'll just ask it. I'll ask it forthright. How do you see fractional ownership in the hobby fitting in as we move forward?
I think that we're in the top of the first in fractional ownership in the hobby. So I think we've had our early adopters, and now I think what Collectible and some other companies are figuring out is those prime assets are going to be loved by investors and collectors till the end of time. So you're seeing the quality of the assets just become so premium now that I think that's really been the growth in that top of the first inning. And where it goes from here, whether it's eBay and getting that and getting exposure at Art Basel, I think we're really seeing the development. And I'm very high on it if you can't tell from that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the comments. I think it's, we're still early in it, and but it makes so much sense to me as time goes by. It's not for everybody. I think that's obvious. A lot of people just might not be interested in it, but those people, I wonder, do they hold shares in corporations as well? I know it's apples to oranges, so not a fair comment. But Perk says, I have that problem too. I want the whole pizza. You're right. Fair enough. All right. Well, with that, Danny, I think we're ready to wrap this up. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up this episode.
That was too fast.
I know.
You promised a full hour. That was like 10 minutes.
I know it goes by fast. We've passed the hour mark. This was a great discussion. So I thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge and your experience within the hobby with the Collectible live audience. To everybody watching, thank you for joining. Thank you for engaging in the chat. You can follow Danny on Instagram and Twitter, I believe, at SportsBalt. Balt is short for Baltimore, at SportsBalt. You can follow me on Instagram at jlee_sportscardslive. And of course, if you have not yet, you can download the Collectible app in the App Store and check out what fractional ownership in the hobby space is all about. And with that, everybody have a great week ahead. We'll see you next weekend. Same time, same place, new guest. Danny, thanks again. This episode is over.